How would everybody like a spy story? So we're entertaining a couple of bona fide spies from one of our intelligence agencies, our headquarters. Actually, three of them. One is the current head of pretty much everything they do in human language technology, and the others are, am I clicking the right thing here? Where's the present? Sorry, where? There. So we're talking about how what we do is generally not very secretive. Involves few things that, govies are always great. If you have anything marked proprietary, they're automatically under NDA. Am I still audible in the back? Great. So I was emphasizing how in text analytics, there's actually very little that is proprietary about the software. You can go to the academic literature and get the best algorithms out there. And as a text analytic company, Basis Technology is as much a data company as a software company. And while I suppose our software is copyrighted and we keep it in a private GitHub, if those secrets were to get out, it wouldn't really cost us very much. Quite different from the world that they come to in the espionage world. And what would you think of the entire day spent going through every aspect of our business, how a software company of 100 people works? What is the one thing that was marked proprietary? Any guesses?
Employment agreement.
Now, we probably should have shown them something about employment agreements. Govies don't understand a lot of times how private employment works. What would it be? The annotation guidelines. That was the only thing that happened to be marked proprietary the entire day. So I'm going to talk about analytics versus triage in a minute, but as kind of a bridge from what Leslie just talked about, I'd actually like to talk annotation as to where it comes in. These are excerpts taken from another brief that I do, specifically on the measuring of information operations. By information operations, what do we mean? Variety of terms. There was a Vatican office that actually invented the word propaganda. That is modern Latin, and yes, there is such a thing. A Roman would not have understood this word. More commonly, we use active measures from the Russian vocabulary, PSYOP from US military, and recently MISO is the US military acronym. I think in the military, once people start to understand your acronyms, you have to change them. By any name, though, it is these variety of operations that are taken with, may even be an ally, but in any case a target, to influence their thinking. And we've seen it as recently as the heavily publicized events of 2016 with respect to our election. It's been much more intensive on what the Russians call their near abroad. For example, in formerly Soviet Georgia, the Saakashvili is an Armenian. Don't ask me why that's a terrible insult, but in Georgia it seems to be. We do it too. Anybody here read this? What if I use Google Translate? What does this look like? Well, pan down to the bottom of the page, click on who. There it is. Okay, Google Translate again. This is a US Central Command overt information operations website. And if you look at the recent history of information operations throughout the US military, you'll find they have been hamstrung above all in getting money. It would be accurate to say we as a country have unilaterally disarmed. And above all, because they lack good measures of effectiveness. Read recent congressional testimony. The highly search-optimized name Roger Smith is unfortunately the one who was doing the testimony. So it's a bit hard to find, being sarcastic, it's a bit hard to find his testimony. But the key problem has been measures of effectiveness. So how do you approach this key mission problem with measures of effectiveness? We're certainly in the realm of affecting human thinking. This is sentiment analysis, which those of us with some text analytic familiarity will understand broadly. This is an example of sentiment analysis that we do. There are two fundamental types of genre, short and long text. Think Twitter or SMS versus your common news story. We have models for each of those. In this case, we have short text. We run through it. And notice that the mixed sentiment, if I just take that entire strength of text, winds up being positive, but with a kind of a moderate confidence. That's probably not what we wanted. The fact that I'm slightly positive, saying I love one thing and hate another, is not very useful. So if we then go to the entity level, I can actually say, yes, we have a high confidence of positivity toward Coke, and a even higher positivity of negative sentiment toward Pepsi. And oh, by the way, we resolved Pepsi to an authoritative ID, which is a little off topic here. All right. Oh, and if we wanted Coca-Cola, we have to have the exact name in this case. This is a capability we're working on, which will, by January, be able to handle the fact that it isn't exactly the same name, Coke versus Coca-Cola. Regardless, I'm off topic. So when we're dealing with sentiment analysis out of the box, we're talking about positive versus negative generally. And there's a common process we go through. Leslie was alluding to it in just about anything we do in text analytics, where we get some sort of corpus. I talked about long text versus short text. That's one of them. There's languages, there's genres, and so on. We get them annotated. We train something, and I'm not even going to get into the some things we use, except to say there are many of them, some of which are artificial intelligence, some of which are machine learning, some of which are deep learning. Name your buzzword. They all have roles in NLP, and none of them are silver bullets for everything in NLP. Bottom line is, you train whatever it is on it, and then you test. And then you go back. Active learning I'll get to a little bit later. Suffice to say, it's a more advanced way of doing annotation where the machine starts to assist the annotator. All right, so for information operations, what do we want to do? Is it helpful simply to say something is positive or negative? Naively, maybe, but when you're talking to an entity that is doing information operations, they don't see the world in positive, negative. Much as we may stereotype our military that way, it is definitely not the way the PSYOP operators work. They see it in terms of their mission objectives. And I have cherry-picked here, I think, 5 of the mission objectives of CENTCOM out of their mission statement. These are the axes on which they want sentiment scored. So how do we go about that? Okay, exactly what I just said. We take a corpus, we get it annotated, but not now for positivity and negativity, which is what we do out of the box, be it Pepsi and Coke or ISIS and the Syrian Liberation Army. We get it annotated for the particular axes we're interested in. Stability in the Middle East, for example, pro or con. And then we go through training testing. We can use active learning. And I added one more at the bottom here, transfer learning. Suffice to say, that allows us in many cases to skip, particularly across languages, getting things annotated, with a big warning on that one, which I'll come back to. Oh, actually, I'll do it right here. One of the tendencies in human language technology is to shortcut. We often have tools in English, and we want to deal with another language. Anybody guess what language this scene uses? The people demonstrating here would be very angry if you called them Spanish. They are Catalan. And their language is further from Spanish than Italian. We've actually recently just adapted for Catalan. On the other hand, someone from Madrid will generally tell you theirs is just bad Spanish. So let's go to something even harder that we dealt with earlier. We've entitled this slide Battle of Tenderness because this came up on Al Jazeera looking through their Arabic service. I was looking for some sample text to do some demonstrations on. And lo and behold, I come up with this picture captioned, well, I can't read Arabic, so I have to use Google Translate, field features map of the Battle of Tenderness. What happened here? What does Philadelphia mean?
City of brotherly love.
Yes, so this is dealing with the Arab word raqqa. What does raqqa mean? It's tenderness. the Battle of Raqqa. So this is a typical example of why you cannot use machine translation ahead of human language technology. And this is going to get into my main topic. If you do that, as soon as you mistranslate something like this, and even human translation loses information, once that information is lost, there is no chance for text analytics to recover it. You've got to do it in the original language. All right, on to my second and primary topic. This comes from literally listening to my customers. From another of our intelligence community customers, they have an internal group called Skunkworks, where they pretty much what it sounds like, they work on new technology. Their leader has two catchphrases he's constantly putting up on the whiteboard whenever he talks. One is, automation should automate. I think we can probably sympathize with that. I deal with a lot of automation that doesn't. And the other is, analytics is my second priority. Triage is my first. There's so much information, can't sort through it all. I start off here with a mission story. We're probably generally familiar with the Boston bombing. And this illustrates the very low level amidst large quantities of information where a single word, a single name can be critical. Tamerlane Tsarnaev left the US, he returned to the US, even though he had been watch-listed by both the FBI and the CIA based on Russian FSB information that he was being radicalized in his homeland. Why do they miss him? Just his name. That's simple. Actually, there were both false positives and false negatives involved in this, pretty much a perfect storm of everything going wrong. If you look at this, and this is another type of translation problem, how do you correctly spell Tsarnaev? It's the only correct way to do it. I'm sorry, that's Tamerlane. That's the correct way to spell Tsarnaev. How do you spell Muhammad? How many ways are there to spell Muhammad? One way. It's in Arabic. And we have to deal with the 14 or so in English. Back to an annotation problem again, getting all of this put together so that we can build the corpus that we're going to run on. And I seem to be hitting the range limits of my clicker. Here we go. Another one from across the Atlantic, where despite the quantity of information having a small amount in it that would have led the British agencies to preventing a couple of underage girls from going and getting married off to ISIS fighters and promptly getting killed, they couldn't find it because of all the quantity of information. And this is a triage problem. We can't keep up with a text. And it used to be fashionable about 5 years ago to say all sorts of wild scaremongering using worse than exponential rates for the growth of data. This is probably the most flagrant I've ever found. I have no idea why anybody from IBM thought this was an intelligent thing to say, but I guess if that was 2006, by now every particle in the universe would be required for this information. I don't even want to project it. I've seen some worse than this, doubly exponential. So only solution is to run away screaming, right? In point of fact, lots of technological revolutions involve some sort of curve that looks like this. One possibility is that it will stay exponential, it's truly an exponential curve, and the world will explode. To my knowledge, that's happened 0 times in human history. What actually happens is you have a toe and you have a head of your curve. And this is exactly what happened. In some cases, the curve doesn't go flat. Text is going flat. Why? If I'm talking about text analytics, it's going flat despite having exploded.
Replaced by video?
No. No, we've still got, everybody walking down the street nowadays is texting, and Facebook oversold the whole video replacement thing. It is finite because human beings have to produce it, at least for the type. I'm not talking about machine-generated text. I'll make an exception. I can produce as much garbage text as you like with my laptop. But human beings are limited in how much text they can produce, and that makes it inherently, one of the aspects of value is scarcity. It makes it inherently limited and scarce, even if it's kind of big. All right, I'm going to stay on this side of the room if you don't mind. What is big? The first big project I worked at, which was so big it was killing what at the time was the Gartner leader in enterprise search, Verity, at our limits, was DIA's WISE. 2003, that was 40 million documents. On the back of that, we attacked Bloomberg News because we had created credibility in what we could do. That 200 million documents, long story short, absolutely broke Verity's capabilities. Fast forward to 2013, I did a little project when I was at MongoDB. They're ridiculed for being web scale, ha. I decided to just basically punch a hole in that and handle a petabyte, stand up a petabyte database. I did it on $3,000 of cloud resources. These problems have been solved when it comes to scaling computers. The computers can handle it. Absolute worst case, what could the whole human race do? Here's some calculations. Bottom line is we're in the hundreds of petabytes per year. What do you think it would cost to run that through a text analytic pipeline? Pretty much everything we have. Any guesses? Suppose you could capture everything human beings were producing, and they were, let's see, this is 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Every human being was producing text. Any guesses how much it would cost? Works out to about $70 million a year. This is an entirely mythical situation of the intelligence agency that can somehow capture everything produced, and humans do nothing but produce text 24/7. You could handle it for $70 million a year. You could put it through a pipeline. What would you find for that? What would you find with that? Intelligence agencies always want to do predictive analytics, looking at the future. How are we going to get that? Well, I found a way. I was looking on my Mac. I've kind of stopped using folders. I just put things in date order. What was the very most recent file on my laptop?
From the future.
Taken by my drone in the future. 15 years from now, my drone took this picture. Oh, wow, this is exciting. What's it going to be? Kind of disappointing. It turns out the only intelligence value in this is I still haven't cleaned that drip off of my kitchen cabinet in 15 years. So of everything we could have had from the future, this is what I got. It's a triage problem. If I get something from the future, it's not valuable. If I could focus on something, even if I could have this future case, if I could have the triage, then it would be valuable. What would be valuable? Next slide. Well, what if we could do it in text and have something today? What's the most valuable text? Suppose I could have several hundred bytes from that same year, from 2032. What would be really valuable? Oh no, I got a tweet from Justin Bieber. What possible value could there be from a somewhat aging Justin Bieber in 2032? This tells us nothing of any intelligence agency use, right? Wait a minute, what do we know?
Who's running the president and all the media companies at large?
And yeah, the Middle East seems to have changed a little, huh? Could be enormously valuable, even in something as simple as pure open source intelligence, if we could just focus efficiently on what we wanted. So that's the key. Do the triage, narrow down this enormous runaway volume of text, which actually is somewhat limited to what the human beings could consume. So let's look at what we'd want to do. What do we want to do on the text analytics side? Bottom line is it's something of a cascade from the most simple, what language is it, to the most abstract, sentiment analysis. And then at the bottom, I ranked on machine translation earlier. It's key, but after all the text analytics. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, except to say that as we go through this cascade, expectations have to vary depending upon what sort of text analytic we're doing. Language ID typically is pretty high. Sentiment is pretty low. But if what we're looking at is something like change of sentiment over time, suppose I have sentiment analysis only 30% accurate, but Leslie, it's not biased. Can I get a signal? Yeah, she's thumbs up. She's a data type. So it comes down to something like this. Hey, the video worked. That's never worked before. It'll be a bunch of analysts consuming information. Just trust me on that one. I'm not going to try to get it running with as balky as this clicker has been. We're going to take a cascade of all of those capabilities that I just showed, and from different parts of the cascade, we got human beings up front doing some searching and using some alerts. This is how you get the future, by the way. You just alert on it. It doesn't arrive before the future, but right at the future. From each step in this, we're going to have a certain percentage where the analytic alone is going to mean that a human being gets a look into it. And some of it may not be all the way down until after it has gone through these more abstract capabilities such as categorization. All this way, as we are performing triage and shooting some percentage over to the humans, we're going to be enriching the information and then building it to the point where at the bottom line translation, some mix of human and machine. And how are we going to pick the humans? Triage. We've now enriched it so that it becomes a perfect corpus for everything else going on here at KM World for searching and alerting. And with that, I'll wrap up. I've run out the time, but I'm happy to stay here and answer questions, but you're also free to go. And questions for Leslie are valid as well.
Yes. Any questions? I know it's late in the day, but that's okay. Take your time. Think of something, right?
I should have planted a question. Next time.
Okay. Well, in that case, we're done for Text Analytics Forum. This was the last, and there are two more keynotes in the KM, more or less KM area. So if you want to take them, you go and visit those, fine. But this is the end of the Text Analytics Forum. I want to thank everybody for coming, especially you all for staying here to the absolute end. We really appreciate it. I hope it was a good conference. I hope you learned a lot, had a good time. And if you've got additional questions afterwards, there's a couple of things that we can take from the KM World group yesterday. So what I'm going to say is that the KM stuff and the keynotes are over at 5. If anybody wants to follow up with additional questions and discussions, we're going to have an incredibly informal community of interest for text analytics up in the bar sometime after 5 o'clock. Anybody just want to stop on by, and there'll be a few of us up there perhaps talking. But other than that, this is it, and thank you all for coming.
Thank you.